Okay. So we're also joined by a couple of special guests. So I have a couple of my past staff members, and I'm going to have them join in and talk about some of their experiences working with me, as well as just what my emphasis on career development helped them with. So I'll have them chime in right now and then in the later on in the presentation. But Terrence, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell everybody kind of when we worked together, what that capacity was, and what you're currently doing.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, my name is Terrence Glaspie. I apologize for the lighting. I worked with Brett for 2 years, from 2015 to 2017, as a resident assistant at Georgia State University. And Brett was really, really intentional with my time there. I fell in love with housing and like student affairs while I was a student leader, and he ensured that my what I learned was able to be applied to future positions overall. So he assisted me in my grad search process, and I was able to get an assistantship as an assistant hall director at University at Buffalo, where I got my master's degree in educational leadership and policy. And I'm currently back at Georgia State University as a residence hall director.
Full circle, huh, Terrence?
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you, Terrence. And Dominique, if you want to share a little bit about kind of how we work together and what you're currently doing.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Dominique Peterson. I also worked with Brett for 2 years. I worked with him 2016 to 2018. I was one of his resident assistants. Brett really helped me with my career goals with trying to do exercise science and go into the health profession. He encouraged me to shadow and do all types of things, and he actually encouraged me to do the senior resident assistant position, which I had never thought of until I got Brett's encouragement. Right now, I just graduated Georgia State University in May. I'm currently in Pittsburgh. I will be starting a doctorate's program in the fall for occupational therapy.
Great. Thank you, Dominique. Thank you both for joining us. And once again, I'll have their input a little bit further with some of the specific activities that we did, as well as offer an opportunity for you all to potentially ask them questions about their experience with some of the activities that we did together. So now I want you all to kind of join in. What are some of your takeaways from this session? What are some things that you hope to gain? Why did you feel the urge to join this webinar? I want to see what those look like. So hopefully if I missed anything throughout the presentation, I can try to make sure to touch on those things or follow up after. But I want to know, what are some things that you all are looking to gain from this? And so once again, either type that in the chat or feel free to speak up. And this is video chat, so feel free to talk and let me know what you're hoping to gain from this. Getting students to get to work on time. Okay. What else? Learn how to capture the growth of our student leaders as it's happening to make their experience more marketable for their applying to jobs. Yeah, this is going to be basically targeting that specific question. So yeah, this should be helpful. I want to give students the tools to be good employees here, but also for their futures. Yep, great. What else? Learn new strategies of motivating Generation Z through career development. We'll talk about some research with that as well. It's fascinating to me how different Gen Z is from some previous generations. How to create an environment where students feel like their work matters. Great. These are all great takeaways. Looking for proven methods to increase student engagement through staffing and training models, assessing learning, skills development, digital badging, micro-queds. All of those are great, are on the table. Great. Better support and encouragement for staff. All these are great. Hopefully I can help touch on all of these. Currently work at an R1 institution and serve a highly driven population of students. I want to help them think about career goals when and if plan A does not pan out, which often is the case. Great question. How do you help them understand that it's more than just a job, that they're actually making a difference on campus and in themselves? Great. Help students maximize their personal strengths. We'll talk specifically about strengths. to help students appreciate the transferable skills they're gaining through work study. Stop with the "I'm just a blank" language. I hated that. So hopefully this will be helpful with that as well. Employability. I'm going to be a supervisor for the first time and want to learn best. I so appreciate you taking the time to do this before you have ever had the opportunity to supervise. So this will be great for you in terms of setting the stage to have a successful experience with that. Explore additional strategies to empower and motivate students that need support. Help inner city newcomer youth with their confidence in approaching employment. Okay, very, very great takeaways. I'm hoping that this will help with all of those. I'll try to be intentional about some of the specific ones that I talked about and read from you all, but thank you all for contributing to that. I hope this is going to be helpful. So what I hope to help you all take away from this is to see these student staff positions as training grounds. So kind of addressing that "I'm just a blank" position, we want to eliminate that, because ultimately we're not going to have all of our students like Terrence, who ended up going into higher ed. A lot of our students are going to want to pursue career paths outside of higher ed, and so we're going to want to see these positions as stepping stones and not as places where we necessarily want to keep students. We want to train them to prepare for whatever roles they want outside of this. Another thing that I would love to see people do is create a staff development plan, and I hope to provide you all with tangible activities as well as resources for you to go about doing that. And these are things that you can do now during the summer before students get here, or maybe you're working in orientation and you already have a staff. You can still try to implement this before the actual school year starts, so you can really hit the ground running and have that plan solidified. I also want to provide you with some strategies to have more meaningful meetings. So that goes with you in your one-on-ones with student staff, as well as your team and staff meetings with student staff. So I'll be able to provide you with a couple of strategies that have worked really well for me, and then to just give you some more ideas that may be helpful for you and your staff. And then lastly, this is kind of an indirect result of what I'm teaching today, is it can potentially lead to you attracting higher quality student leaders in the future. So if all of your students are talking about how well Terrence does to prepare his students for jobs, then the next year a lot more top talent, high quality student leaders might want to come work for you if they know that your students that you're working for are landing jobs and internships with very highly competitive companies, or getting into the grad schools that they're interested in. So this is more of an indirect result, but can still be very, very helpful in terms of your experience if you plan on staying at a school for, at least more than just 1 year. So those are my major takeaways. And then some of the other things that you mentioned will kind of be included throughout here. So just kind of what I plan on going through today, the research, just a little bit. I don't want to bore you too much with Gen Z research, and you guys can read articles and do that. I'm going to cover that just very briefly, enough to help you realize how important this is to use as motivation for implementing some of these activities. The next thing is teaching you some resources for creating that staff development plan that I spoke about in the last slide. One-on-one meetings and seeing how we can be more productive with those, and helping students connect the dots between their current role and their future career goals. And then some performance evaluation strategies. I know that some institutions have these in place and they're very structured. I'm not going to try to teach you how to have these conversations. I'm going to just share with you some other additional things that you can do to better prepare your students. This isn't teaching you how to conduct those conversations. This is more so helping you to prepare your students for future similar conversations. Team meeting activities, as I shared before. And then lastly, just some kind of miscellaneous career development activities that may not have fallen directly in one of the other categories. So jumping directly into the research. So within Generation Z, there's a lot of research out there. You can look at a lot of different white papers, articles, presentations, TED Talks, but one of the main things that these continue to focus on is how important career development is for this younger population. They're very different from previous generations, but they want very highly individualized career planning as well as a very individualized approach to their career. They don't feel like there are cookie cutter plans for their careers anymore. They feel like they are the architects of their own careers, and they have the ability to do whatever they want to do by having intentional experiences that help them get there. So it's just something to keep in mind. All of these studies are showing that career development and professional development rank as one of the very highest desires from this population, from their workplace. And so this goes for higher ed, this goes for corporate America. It doesn't really tend to change too much within the specific population. They're really looking for that. And they're also looking for supervisors as mentors, not as a boss who tells them what to do. They want to work with somebody who's going to get to know them personally, as well as somebody who's going to be very invested in helping them get to their next steps. The other thing to consider is that this population is very highly entrepreneurial. There are high schoolers out here making more money than all of us right now. So a lot of these students are coming into college with the expectation that they're already going to start their business, or they may already have a business that they're currently working on. You're starting to see a lot of colleges offer entrepreneurship as a major, as a minor, but just you hear everybody nowadays has a side hustle, everybody has a business, but a lot of these students will want to pursue those ideas. So it's really good for us as supervisors to foster that and encourage that. And a lot of workspaces, that's kind of looked down upon because employers think that they're going to put more attention on their business than they are the work. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter as long as the work is getting done. If they're in a job at the college that work for you as they're saving money to build their business, there's really nothing wrong with that. And we have to accept the fact that being a front desk assistant or being an orientation leader is not their ultimate career goal. And so finding ways to help encourage those ideas and help them to gain experiences so they can either build portfolios or build the experiences to help them get clients, or to just help them with skill development in that area. We see a lot of this population as freelancers and operating in the gig economy. So they may be entrepreneurial, but they may only get like one client a month, or they may just take things as they come. So we also have to be conscious of that and aware of that. I understand that some schools may have different policies as it relates to the different student staff requirements and how they're able to take on additional roles or additional responsibilities, but it's still something to keep in mind that this is something that we should be encouraging and not kind of telling them to push aside until they graduate. This is something they want to really get done now. And then also this whole conversation about influencers and how big of an impact this has on this population. There's a lot of research out there in Gen Z consumer behavior that talks about how people are more likely to buy from an influencer than they are from a commercial, or they're getting most of their marketing from YouTube versus TV or any other ads, and they're trusting these people as experts to be buying their products. And so this is another thing to be aware of, and something that you can actually use in your favor if your students have somewhat of an impact, or have a decent following, or want to be influencers. It's no longer a joke. People are making very good money doing it. So if your students have a passion for this, keep in mind different ways that you can foster that and encourage that for those students. I hear a lot of people downplaying that and like, oh, you should get a real job or do these, but honestly, it is a real job. You know, within my own experience running my own social media, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of consistency. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of recording and editing. And so the students who are putting that into play, encourage that and help them build on that in any way you can. Another thing to consider is, as you're looking for professional development opportunities or collaboration opportunities on campus, think about how you may be able to learn more entrepreneurial skills, or think about how you may be able to collaborate with the department that does that so that you can better support those students who have those goals. And then lastly, just thinking about tech in general. Tech is now, it's also the future. Every single job that exists now is somehow going to be impacted by tech. A lot of students are wanting to get into tech. It's every single list you look at, it's healthcare and tech as the top jobs. And so students are paying attention to that more than I think my generation did, where we're like, we're going to do whatever we want because it's going to make us happy. And then this generation has seen millennials take on a lot of student loan debt. They've seen millennials go into fields of study that don't necessarily pay very well. They've seen our population struggle financially. And so a lot of them are making smarter career decisions and trying to get into spaces like tech where they know there's going to be guaranteed jobs and they know that those jobs are going to pay well. So we have to make sure that we are staying savvy and we are understanding what's going on in tech. We don't have to be technical experts. You don't have to know how to code. But if you're not going to work in tech, you almost have to learn how to be tech adjacent. And so a lot of our positions will require us to continue to learn more about tech and just kind of make sure that we're paying attention to those trends. For those of you who might be wondering, like, where are good places for me to pay attention and stay up to date with these things, I highly recommend LinkedIn. Not just because I use it frequently and it's been helpful for my career, but they have the news that pops up. I read that every morning. A lot of times those are very hot topics around the workplace, around tech, around entrepreneurship, around education. So that's a great resource if you're looking to stay up to date with credible news. Other things is just to find experts in your industry or thought leaders that you can potentially follow and stay up to date with the work that they're doing. But always being a lifelong learner, I don't see that as much of an issue for people who work in higher ed. Obviously, we've committed to that. So just making sure that you're staying up to date with these trends because they will affect your students and the career goals that they do have. So that's it for the research. I promise not to bore you with too much, but this is just helpful for you to know, to set the stage and have some context as we continue to go through this conversation. So I want you all to chime in again. I want to know, have you ever used a staff development plan? So have you ever used something that was given to you from your department? Have you ever created something on your own? But I want to know, have you taken the time to create something in advance for how you plan to engage with your students and provide them with developmental activities outside of kind of your regular training schedule? If the answer is yes, I'd love for somebody to speak up and share what that experience might have been like for them. Have you ever created or used a staff development plan? Created one for resident assistants and integrated into weekly staff meetings? Great, that's awesome. Anybody else? Okay, somebody else did that for RAs and staff meetings. Do a lot of goal setting worksheets and follow up. Awesome. Trying to implement ongoing opportunities. Great. Awesome. Anybody else? Okay. So Stacy has did it more for developing them as RAs, but not for their own professional area. Okay. So it sounds like some people have done this before. Great. Incorporated in professional reviews. Awesome. So some people have done this. To me, it's helpful. To me, it's one of the reasons why I was able to accomplish as much as I have done with my student staff. Obviously, that's kind of an idealistic goal if you're planning out the entire thing. I've found that even if you don't get through everything or every single thing's not accomplished, I feel like I've been able to get more done because it's written down and showcased to the students and to other staff members, so that there's kind of that accountability. Have you done this thing that you plan to do at the beginning of the year? So now we're going to talk about, some strategies for creating this plan specifically. Thank you all for chiming in and talking about that experience. That's going to be helpful. Okay, so in terms of creating this plan, as I shared before, it's so helpful for you to plan. And a lot of times we have all these ideas and things that we want to do and they stay in our head, but they don't often happen until you actually write it down and make an intentional plan to do it. This is not the most fun experience. I'm not promising that will be, but it will be helpful. And so this quote, I'm sure you all heard it before, but if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So with without having that plan in place, a lot of the ideas that you have might not actually come to fruition. So this is where it's helpful to plan this in advance. So doing this over the summer or doing this now so that when your students do get there, or if they're already there, you can implement this at the beginning of the year. So as kind of Stacy shared, you know, that's one of the things that I would recommend. If you're creating this plan, I recommend having 3 distinct areas where you focus on development. One is the actual position that the student is in. So making sure that they are learning their job that they have very well. So that those things will include your training at the beginning of the year. They may include staff meetings, in-services, things like that, as they're learning to better prepare themselves for their current role. The second area I would focus on is leadership skills, so being a student leader in general. So things like team building, conflict resolution, those soft skills that they would learn throughout kind of leadership programs and things that you can help implement in their current role to better them as leaders in general. And then lastly, the part where you're connecting the dots between what they're currently doing and what they want to do. So talking about things like resume reviews, being intentional about utilizing LinkedIn on a consistent basis, giving them additional activities that relate to their career path so that they are feeling like they are architects of their own careers and that they're having a customized experience, even though they're on a team of multiple people. And so having this plan, you know, laid out may not be as individualized, but once you get into those one-on-one meetings and those one-on-one relationships, that's where you can be a little bit more customized with those specific conversations that you're having. But overall, you can create this entire plan for one staff, and you'll talk about the student position, student leadership, as well as career development. And then once again, I mentioned just try to do this before they get there. I've never tried to do it and have them a part of that conversation. I've done that for other things. And so, I mean, if that's something that interests you, feel free to try it. Let me know how that goes. I definitely think that it can work well in both cases. Especially as it comes to specific activities that they have to complete. But I think if you have kind of a brief overview and you share that with them and they can provide some feedback, that's probably a better way to go than to involve them from the very get-go. Build some things into place and then ask for things that they want to add. One of the things that I was very strategic about with my student staff was being a very democratic leader and involving them in the processes, involving them in major decisions as long as I could that affected different roles and responsibilities that they would have to do as staff members. So think about those things, whatever makes the most sense for the positions that you're supervising or hiring for. And then lastly, another thing that you can do once you're finished is share that with your current supervisor, or maybe share that with a colleague for feedback so that you can get some more insight, maybe some things that you forgot, or maybe ideas that your supervisor has done in the past that have worked well. This can just be good so that you have somebody else to hold you accountable, but it also gives you things to talk about when it comes to your own one-on-one meetings and how you are developing this and your staff. So this can be really helpful in terms of, you know, just being intentional about the year and what you have planned. But also, it's just a good skill to have if you've never done strategic planning. This can be a really good area to start. This is one thing that I learned while at Georgia State. We were responsible for creating plans like this, and it's something that was really helpful for me in terms of staying active and, you know, constantly reminding myself to do these activities with my staff, because we get tired. Things pop up, but at the end of the day, our goal is to prepare these students for their careers. And so having that plan was a constant reminder to be putting things in place to prepare them for their next roles. And so I will be sharing a template via email. So if you're looking like, I don't know where to start, or you want something with a couple of examples, I'll be sharing the template via email when I send this link back out. For those of you who are listening in, you might want to watch this back or not. I'll send the email with that link as well as a couple of templates that you can use to get started on this if you've never done this. So jumping into the one-on-one meeting activities piece. So this is where I'm going to have Dominique and Terrence share a little bit about their experience. But one of the biggest things that I found a lot of value in, and when I was working with my student staff, is really taking advantage of that very first one-on-one meeting. So obviously, potentially throughout the training sessions, you'll get to know them, you'll have lunch with them or you have dinner, whatever that looks like. But when you have that first official one-on-one meeting, you want that to really be all about that student. And for me, the activity that I did specifically, and I let my students know, this is not going to be something where you feel like you have to talk about work every single time we sit down and have a one-on-one meeting. It can be personal, but for this first one, I want to set the stage for what this year looks like and provide you with opportunities to get direct experience that relate to your own personal career goals. So the activity that we did was I had them bring in a job description, an internship description, or a grad school program description, whatever was their ideal next step. And the reason why I did this is I think that when you work with a lot of young people, they're so busy trying to plan out the rest of their entire lives that they sometimes lose focus and think that they're going to, I want to be a CEO. It's like, okay, well, what's the first step? Let's work on that. For me, when I was a junior in college, I would have said I wanted to be a teacher. And then my senior year, I wanted to work in student affairs. When I got into grad school, I wanted to be a campus president. And now I don't want any of those things. So it's important for you to understand and realize, think about your own personal careers and how that may relate to your own students, that they shouldn't be thinking too far in advance. Help them focus on what their next step is. So we use that and we put it side by side with their student staff job description. So for me, it was a resident assistant position, and we went through and we highlighted things that sounded similar. So for one of my students, they were looking to go into criminal justice. And so one of the things that it mentioned on a job description was something about having highly detailed reports. And so for that person, I let them know when it comes to responding to incidents and writing incident reports, this needs to be one of the best things that you do. This needs to be one of the things that you focus on. You should be the person on our staff that people go to for, assistance with writing these things, because those are opportunities for you to talk about that in a future interview. These are things that you can mention on your resume. These are things that you can work on your own personal branding to do. And then really, like I mentioned, highlighting that transferability. So if there are areas for students to do programs, if they want to be an event planner, it's like, okay, hey, you may want to do more than what's required of you. So just making sure that you spend time with that first one-on-one meeting and showcasing to them, this isn't just a blank position. This is a training opportunity for you in whatever you want to do. Within higher ed, a lot of us have opportunities to provide our students with budgets sometimes. We have the resources to help them put these things together. So just letting them know up front that this is not just a place for you to work, get your check, and move on. This is an opportunity for you to prepare yourself for whatever your ideal career goals are. It doesn't really matter too much what you want to go into. We can find a way to make that connection and connect those dots. So Terrence, if you could jump in and just kind of share what that looked like for you and how that helped you in terms of your motivation in the RA position.
Yeah, so I originally started out as a journalism major, and I remember meeting with Brett the first time during our one-on-one, and we were looking at internships around the city in Atlanta and stuff like that. But of course, I started to really gain a passion for student affairs overall. So as time went on, I really appreciated the second time we worked together, especially during our first one-on-one, because we were able to talk about the different grad school programs that there were, how I could use my RA experience in an assistant hall director position. So, we're talking about like budgeting. So if the RAs are doing programs, what can I do to ensure that, I'm up to date on that stuff? If we're talking about I'm scheduling duty for these RAs, for myself and my staff members as well, how can I ensure that, I'm doing that in a good enough position to where, I can talk about my experiences with that. And even like helping out with supervision. So if Brett was ever gone, and I could assist with anything that needed to be done in terms of like administrative skills. So I really appreciated how it was individualized, because I was able to specifically say, I want to go into student affairs. I want to go into grad school. I want to be an assistant hall director to start my student affairs career off. And, we were able to basically like map out the entire semester. And I really appreciated that.
Cool. Thanks, Terrence. Dominique?
Yeah, so this activity was actually really helpful for me. I was one of those students that Brett mentioned in the beginning where their career path didn't really line up with being in higher education. And so I personally did not see the correlation between being an RA and going into a health profession. And so when I first sat down with Brett, he asked me, what is it that you want to do? And I told him I'm very interested in exercise science and I really want to get my foot into the door. And at that time, I was looking to work at a gym, whether it's being employed or getting an internship. And so we looked at the job descriptions, and some of the things were very straightforward, such as enforcing policy, things like that I would have to do as an RA. But Brett kind of got me to think outside the box by things like, one of the job descriptions was promoting health and wellness and programming and getting people to join the gym and things like that. And so Brett and I discussed, well, what's something you could do as an RA that's going to promote people to be healthy and get into fitness? And, bulletin boards, that's a huge thing. It's the first thing you see when you walk onto your floor. And a lot of people will stop and look at it if it grabs your attention and it catches your eye. And so a specific task that Brett gave me to do was, okay, make a bulletin board about the rec center and promoting how you can get healthy and so that your residents can see it. And so I went and I did that, and it eventually led to me getting a job at the rec center. So that was something that I really appreciated, because I would have never thought to do something like that myself. And I really appreciate that Brett went even further than that. Once I got the job, it was like we had another conversation that was like, okay, well, what's next? And I told him I want to go to grad school. I want to get my doctorates. And he does a really good job of asking the questions like, okay, what do you need to do? How are you going to do that? And one of the things I mentioned was getting observation hours. And he said, okay, well, the next time we meet, I want you to have at least reached out to 3 places that you could potentially get observation hours at. And so by creating that relationship where he's now making me hold myself accountable, I'm inspired and motivated to be like, okay, next time I see Brett, I really want to tell him good news, and I really want him to see that I'm trying and I'm working. And those one-on-ones definitely helped shape me into a better student leader and somebody who was more confident in pursuing their career path.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both for sharing that. Honestly, this is why I was doing the work that I was doing, was to be able to help the students get to the levels that they are now from where they were. And one of the other things that I noticed, and maybe you all felt this, but because of the very intentional efforts and the care for their career goals, I felt like a lot of students were sometimes afraid to disappoint me in some of the work that they were doing, because they knew that I was going to be that person for them, to be that champion for them, to make sure that they were getting to where they wanted to be. And so when it came to their student staff positions, I didn't experience, especially within my second and third year, I didn't experience too many issues where I had to follow up with students about getting their job done. Very, very minor documentation issues, nothing as it related to major job tasks. Maybe they were late to a desk shift or something like that, but I found that to be helpful in terms of them reciprocating that care for me and my role, because I felt the same way towards them. So it helped with that motivation to do their current role, as well as avoiding some of those issues that come about with disciplinary or anything like that. So thanks again for both of you for sharing. This is one of the most impactful things that I can share with you all. So if this is something that makes sense for you and your staff, I highly recommend trying this out. Another thing, I didn't do this with all of my student staffs. It's one of the things that I would have wanted to do had I had the time and the ability to do. There were a couple of times where I had to take on additional responsibilities and wasn't able to implement everything that I wanted to. But commitment contracts can be very helpful, just as a resource to help the students visualize what their specific goals are. So I used this when I was at FIU. Shout out to the Panther family that's joining. But this is an opportunity for you to create a list of SMART goals, in a sense, for your students, but giving them very individualized tasks that they should do. So potentially, if I was to do this with Dominique, one of her things would have been to shadow at least 3 people. It may have been another thing to have an informational interview. It may have been to go to the career services and have your resume reviewed one time, but helping them come up with very specific goals. So after you go through that process and you showcase to them, okay, here are ways for you to gain experience in your future career, but also do your current student staff job really well. Here are additional activities that may not be necessarily related to the job, or they could be if, for example, it was to create a bulletin board about promoting the student center, but giving them very specific activities and goals to complete. And so they have a copy of that. You'll have a copy of that. That can be something that you check in with throughout one-on-one meetings and saying like, hey, how are you doing on this? Have you began thinking about this? Or, hey, first semester's over, you've only gotten one done, what are you doing to do this? Or, you know, you got all 5 done in the first semester, is there any new ones that you want to create? This can be really helpful. I also have a template that I can share with you all with the commitment contracts as well, but this is just so that the students have very individualized goals that they can complete, some of those within the job and some of those without, just so that I'm constantly aware of what their goals are and the things that they're working on. So after we sit down and chit chat and just catch up on personal life, I can say, okay, have you done the job shadowing? Do you need me to help do outreach for you? Or if I have free time, would you like for me to look up some networking events for you? Those types of things. And just making them constantly aware that you're involved and you are invested in their career development and helping them get to that next level. I found this to be extremely helpful, but also challenging, because there were times where I would have great students who wanted to continue as student leaders or come back for a second year. And I would kind of like lightly threaten them that I would not hire them back, just because it was important for me that they were making the best decisions for them career-wise. So if they were RAs, it was like, okay, you've done this for 2 years. If you're not going into student affairs, if you don't need the money for housing, like, you need to start thinking about things where you can be more intentional. So there were several times where I threatened not to bring people back because I didn't feel like the position was contributing to their future career goals. So this is something to keep in mind as well as you're working with students is, you know, even if they'll continue to be a good staff member, you kind of have to give that up and push them in a direction that's going to be more positive for them, and hopefully helping them get an internship or maybe an executive board position in a student organization that's more closely related to the career path that they're pursuing. And then lastly, this is something that we started. I would have loved to see this, you know, happen a little bit more strongly, but it's just something that kind of fell through the cracks. But once again, these are just resources for you to try if they make sense with your staff. So one of the things that I really push for my career coaching clients, as well as the students that I coach, is to always keep a portfolio. I don't know where this came from, where like only art majors or marketing or digital, whatever, people have to keep a portfolio. In my opinion, every single professional should have a portfolio. And I know people, even throughout my higher ed journey, who have gotten jobs simply because they were the only person with the portfolio. And it kind of showcases that they were willing to go above and beyond and be able to actually showcase the work that they were doing instead of just telling people about it. So providing them with maybe like a 3-ring binder or something where they can keep track of the different things that they're doing. They can have a copy of that staff development plan that you've created. They can have that activity, the future job descriptions with the current job descriptions, what they've highlighted, their commitment contracts, all of that kind of in the beginning. And then throughout the year, they're keeping track of the different things that they're doing. So if they have an event, making sure that they're taking pictures. If they're having one-on-ones with their residents, asking them to kind of capture testimonials potentially. Anything that they can have to showcase their work is going to be very important as they go throughout that job search process, because if that student who really wanted to go into criminal justice has very, very well-written incident reports that they can actually share with an employer in an interview, that helps them stand apart from anybody else who's just talking about their experience doing it. So huge advocate for this for each and every professional and student alike, keeping a portfolio for that purpose. And then lastly, I include LinkedIn in here. Anybody who knows me or anybody who is paying attention to any of the work that I'm doing, I push LinkedIn more than anything else. I think LinkedIn is going to eventually replace the resume completely. And so I find it very helpful to encourage students to keep track of their work and to post about it and share that just as a personal branding tool. So if they have an event or they have a program, they take a picture, they share it on LinkedIn, they share what their takeaways were, they maybe ask some students to provide quotes for it, but they're documenting the things that they're doing. As it relates to LinkedIn and some content creation, you don't want to focus too much on creating things because for them, they're already doing the work, and it would be more so about capturing that experience so they can share that. Let's see.
Hey, Brett.
Yes.
Hey, we got a question from Drew.
Okay.
Just a question back on the portfolio. Does the student keep their portfolio or does it live with the supervisor?
So I would definitely recommend giving it to the student just so they have that with them and they have that to keep track of everything. I would ask them to bring it to each staff meet or to each one-on-one meeting. Doesn't necessarily have to be a conversation about it every single time, but getting them in the habit of bringing it so they can showcase to you, these are the pictures that I took at my program, or this is the recycling initiative that I did, whatever. But that's a great question. I would definitely leave it with a student and put it in their hands so they feel responsible for keeping it up. Because ultimately, like, a lot of these things are for them to keep in the mindset of. So when they leave this position, they should still be in that mindset to maintain a portfolio and keep track of all the work that they're doing. This is how people have conversations about raises, promotions, getting new jobs, salary negotiation. It's by showcasing your results. And so getting people in the habit of that early can be really helpful. Good question. So within the performance evaluations, which we kind of touched on just recently, but use these as opportunities to prepare your staff for future conversations. So we're not changing the structure of these. We may be asking students to potentially opt into this. So if your student feels like they did a really good job, you may not be able to offer them a raise or a promotion, but you may be able to ask them, is this a conversation you'd like to practice and have? I know for me, even as a student affairs professional, before I started doing certifications in salary negotiations and interviewing, I didn't feel comfortable doing this. Nobody took the time to teach this to me, even as a full-time working professional. And so utilizing these conversations as opportunities to teach them how to have these conversations can be really, really helpful for them, so that if they do go into their next position, they may have some leverage in terms of negotiating their salary because they've practiced that with you. Or they may have done really well in their first year at their first job, they can have a conversation about a raise. Or if they're doing an internship and they want to stay on with that company full time, they have prepared this type of conversation and had this conversation before. And then ultimately, they're utilizing that portfolio to justify the things that they're asking for. Because this is how it works for us as professionals in the real world. If you're asking for these types of things, you're going to have to be able to back it up with data. And so for them, getting them in the mindset of keeping track of the work and the good work that they're doing, so that if they were to ask for a raise and you challenge them on that, they have proof to back it up. You know, I held 2 more events than I was supposed to. Both of them, I had at least 25 people in the room, those types of things. You want to get them confident speaking about their previous contributions to your organization as well as your staff, so that they know how to do that in the future. This is a great opportunity for you to follow up on those commitment contracts. Something to consider is if they meet all 5 of those goals, maybe you provide them with something, or maybe if your entire staff hits on all 5 of their goals, you do something for the entire staff. That can increase team accountability. If, you know, one person is struggling, they can help each other kind of rally behind and help them to make sure that they're meeting those goals, but providing a potential incentive so that they're encouraged to do those. A lot of times we as higher professionals are like, why should we incentivize this when they should be doing it already? This is sometimes their first job. This is sometimes their first supervisor who's prepared them for things like this. And so it's helpful for us to get them excited about doing it first. So then when they see the benefits of doing that, it can be a little bit more internal motivation for them to do that in the future for themselves. Yes, the staff accountability is great. That pressure can sometimes be good, but make sure that you're following that up with support. Lastly, I mention it again, LinkedIn, for you as a supervisor, leave them a LinkedIn recommendation. Write a detailed thing of the things that they excelled with. Make sure that you try to focus that on their career goals. So if you do have somebody who's interested in marketing, let's say, and they're trying to find a marketing job, they were really helpful with, social media efforts or creating flyers for events, focusing on those types of things. So if potential employers see that, they can see that somebody's intentionally highlighting their marketing skills regardless of whatever position they were in. And that just kind of is beneficial for them if employers are going to their page and seeing that somebody has justified the work that they're talking about, especially if it's somebody like a supervisor. Let's see. Is there a question?
Yeah, Brett. It looks like we have a question from Stacy. She asked, did you certify people on your own, or did you work with an outside entity or another campus organization?
What do you mean, did I certify people?
Let's see. See, Stacy, if you'd like to, you can actually unmute your mic if you can clarify that a little bit.
Sure, sorry about that. Brett, I was just curious, you had mentioned that you gave out certifications for people in like salary negotiations or interviewing, and that might be something that you do now professionally, but did you do that when you worked with staff on a campus, and did you do that on your own, or was that with another organization, career development organization, NACE or whatever?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So I might have misspoke. I wasn't giving certifications. I was completing them on my own. That's why I was saying, like, for me, I didn't learn it as a professional. I had to take on certifications of my own in my own professional development to learn how to have those types of conversations. So I wasn't actually certifying people or giving them a certification for those skills. That was just me learning how to do it so I could better prepare myself or my students. Okay, so good question. Jumping into staff meetings, this is something that probably some of you are already doing, but utilizing some of that staff time to provide some of that skill development. So maybe there's a specific area that you notice people are struggling with. So maybe there's a lot of roommate conflicts and RAs aren't doing a good job with it. Maybe have a session about conflict resolution and thinking about providing that throughout the year as well. I know that a lot of times we talk about doing that, but we don't get around to doing it because we have so much information to cover, but thinking about those as opportunities to provide trainings as well. One of the things that I started doing in my final year was engagement check-ins, which I think were really helpful. I did them every other week, and I had them do kind of these 4 things here. So I had them rank from 1 to 10, how engaged are you right now? And my staff knew that there were no ramifications for this if there was a low ranking. Like for me, it was like, I need to know this so I can better pivot and plan things for you. So rank and be honest, how engaged are you in your current role? Have you been able to do something you enjoy? And I would give them opportunities to list that. Have you been able to learn something? If that was no, if either one of the answers to these questions were no, I had them provide things that they wanted to do. So it helped me kind of go through my process in planning this. Okay, 3 people said that they haven't been able to do anything they enjoy, and they really enjoy planning events together. So now in the next meeting, I may bring up, okay, let's plan an event as a staff and come up with that together so that everybody is doing something that they enjoy. And if they wanted to learn something specifically, I may appoint them to a position to be involved with that for that event or something like that. And then once again, just providing some suggestions for them to give to me, and being very democratic once again, and letting them know that, like, I don't always know best what you all need. I can utilize my experience and my education, but ultimately, like, I want to hear from you all. And you can do this every week. You can do this every other week, maybe once a month. But I would just pass these out and collect them. I didn't really go through it too much in the meeting. This was something that I used in private. Yes. Frank, was there a question?
Yeah, and we got a question from Solange, and this definitely is on pace with where we're at, because sometimes this happens during engagement check-ins, and sometimes you find out about these things during staff meetings. But she asked, do you have any good resources for conflict resolution? Any techniques, any styles that you've used that kind of are effective?
Yeah, so I will try to send out, if I can find it. One of the things, some of you may have done this before, but it's like you take an assessment and it puts you on kind of like that matrix of like how direct or indirect you are, how emotionally involved or how unemotionally involved you are in your conflict with people. And so when we did that, there was a kind of understanding that there are people who, when they engage in conflict, they're very heavily emotionally involved, and they're also very direct. So when they have issues, they address it up front. And so when we did that activity, we were able to see who all in the room was where. So if we had issues with our staff members, we kind of had a better idea of how to approach that person. So for me, I was the type of person where when I am engaged in conflict, it's very highly emotionally involved as well as very direct. And so if I have an issue with you, I'm probably going to address it up front. But if I know that you're the complete opposite, I may be more aware of how I approach you in that situation. So that was really helpful for me to do with my staff last year, because I think, you know, people are going to come into the year making assumptions about people. And then when you have that activity where you kind of figure out conflict styles, you start to realize, okay, this person isn't being quiet or this person isn't being annoying. Like, that's just how they are. So I can send that out. That was really helpful, not only for me to understand, but for the team to kind of understand where people were and if they had issues with them, how to better address it. I'll look to send that out with the follow-up email. And then lastly, we did career goals check-in. So I think this was every week. We went around and had each person talk about where they were and where they were like hoping to be. So if they were applying for internships, if they had a current job, how that was going, what that experience looked like for them. It helped people stay aware of each other's career goals. So if they met people, they could connect them with it. And once again, it also helped with that team accountability. So if somebody said, I know there was somebody on staff who was really working on their fitness goals. It wasn't really related to career, but that was their big thing. And so some of the people would go to the gym with them. There were people trying to help each other get jobs on my staff. So those things are really helpful, just so that people are constantly aware of what each other's career goals are. And that's something that we did every week. The template of the engagement check-ins. I tried to find that. I cannot, but I'll recreate it again. It was just a simple like Word document. I can put that in there as well. Were these engagement check-ins anonymous, or did you have them put their names? I think this is going to be up to you. I think when I started to implement it, this was like second semester. That wasn't intentional. It's just something that I created as a way to gauge that. At that point, we had already built a close enough relationship to where if Dominique put a 3 out of 10, I was like, okay, girl, we need to have a conversation. It wasn't so much that, you know, I was going to judge her based on her level of engagement. It was more so for me to know. I think at that point in our relationship, it was easier, so it wasn't anonymous. But I think if maybe you're starting to do it in the beginning, it may be helpful for you to do that until you kind of have a better rapport with each student that you have. So make sure just do it, whatever's best for you in your current situation. If you feel like you can do it and have their name on it, it may be more helpful so you know exactly who to target if everybody's engaged but that person. I would say just try it out and figure out whatever works best with you. Dominique, do you want to talk about kind of that career goals check-in and how that kind of influenced you or some of the people you saw on staff?
Yeah, so the career goals check-in, I think it really helped us create a support system for one another. Like Brett was saying, people had personal goals and people had professional goals, but we realized that we all had very similar goals and we were all able to help each other. And so it kind of created a more like family dynamic in our staff, which I think really helped us as RAs, because we ended up, you know, wanting to work with each other more and then wanting to do programs together and collaborate. And it just built like a genuine friendship that ended up reflecting in our positions as well.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. Terrence, I don't think we did that your year, did we?
No, we didn't. But
Okay.
I think it sounds really great, and you know, I would love to like provide that as an opportunity for like my future staff.
Yeah, and that's easy. That's maybe 10 minutes at the start of staff meeting just to see where everybody's at. So there's no template or anything for that. Just go around and check in and see where people are at. I know we're running a little bit late on time, but if you're here to stay, I'm going to go through it. And if you have to go, that's fine. Thank you for joining. You can catch the recording, but I'm going to continue to go through it if you're still able to stick around. So here's just some additional activities that may not have necessarily fallen in one of those categories. So creating additional expectations. So this this can be tricky depending on the relationship that you have with your staff, or depending on the already current demand of the position that they're in. So you don't want to overload them with too many different things. If they already have a lot going on in their student life, they may be involved, they may be working on that, but providing students with additional expectations. And these don't have to be hard expectations. These could be something similar to my conversation with Dominique about, like, I want you to have 3 different places to shadow, or something like that. But showcasing to them that you really personally want to see them do these things can sometimes be the push that they need, or they may be tired or just unmotivated, and you might be the only person who's really pushing them to do those things. So encouraging them to go to career services for a resume review, or go to networking events. I know me personally, one of the things that I did was I networked on behalf of my students. So if I was out at an event, for my own personal, whatever, whether it was social or professional, and I met somebody who was, owned a modeling company, I'll be like, oh, one of my RAs wants to model, let me connect them somehow. So doing that for them, as well as encouraging them to go do that for themselves. And then, of course, job shadowing. One other cool thing that you can do is to create community around LinkedIn. Gonna keep saying it, is to have pods, which is basically a group of people who contribute to each other's content. I think this can be a very cool activity. Something I was never able to do but would have loved to do is encourage people to post. So if one RA had a program, they could post about it on their LinkedIn and tag the rest of the RAs, which would then encourage all of them to go on there and comment, leave meaningful comments, engage in the conversation, help boost the awareness of that post, so that more people were exposed to the work that they were doing. And if you have, 10 plus people doing this consistently, you're going to start to generate a lot of buzz, not only for each individual person, a lot of buzz for your staff, a lot of buzz for the supervisor, a lot of buzz for the department, a lot of buzz for the school. So this can be beneficial for your staff as well as your institution at large. If they see that there are, 8 to 10 people from this one school constantly posting on LinkedIn and sharing the work that they're doing, that can be very beneficial for them as well as you, as well as your department. So encouraging that can be really helpful. I've used it personally for my own business, and it's been really helpful for me. Another thing to consider is like having like a LinkedIn party. It's not really an official activity or a name. It's just something that I found to be helpful, or something that I would have loved to do. Just staff meeting, allowing each RA to leave a LinkedIn recommendation on each other's profile and talk about their ability to work as a team, their ability to contribute to certain projects that relate to their individual career goals. So if it's a marketing person, encouraging everybody to talk about their ability to create flyers and promote those things out. That's something that I would have loved to do, but didn't necessarily have the time. So thinking about that, if you do have an opportunity, a free staff meeting, maybe instead of canceling it, just making it an hour and allowing them to do this for themselves. And then in addition, just set the example. So if what I've come to realize is if you're a driven, ambitious, motivated professional, your students kind of latch on to that a little bit. They want to do that for themselves. They want to see themselves excelling in their own careers as well. And so if you're somebody who just kind of just does the bare minimum in your job, it's hard for you to expect your students to do more than that. So setting the example, make sure that you're out building your own career, that you're active on LinkedIn, that you're attending networking events, that you're trying to invest in professional development opportunities to better yourself, so that students have that as well. And then lastly, so this is what I would love to do. I would love to contribute to keep this conversation going. As I mentioned, these are just some activities that I've done, some strategies that I've used that have been really helpful. But I want to hear from you. What I'm going to do when I send the follow-up email, I'm going to include a link to a survey. And I want you all to, if you have any things that you've done specifically, I know some of you shared specific activities that you've done. I'd love for you to fill that out and share strategies that you've utilized that have gone very well, or how you've implemented career development activities that have increased motivation for your staff. I'd love for you to fill that out, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this presentation into kind of a guide in an article, and I want to include some of the strategies that you all provide, and I want to tag you and feature you and help us all kind of build our brands as professionals in the higher ed space. And I'm going to post that on LinkedIn, and I hope to create a kind of a guide that people can use potentially to provide with their staffs, to provide to grad students, whatever, to help them be more intentional about creating opportunities for career development within their staff. So I'm going to send that out with the templates, with the examples, that survey. So it is going to be kind of a very engaging email. There will be a lot for you to do if you plan to do that. But if you have things that maybe I didn't mention that you'd love to share with others, feel free to fill that out. As I mentioned, I want to keep this conversation going. I want to be able to provide these opportunities for everybody else who may work in higher ed and may need this help as well. So that goes for you all who are playing this back and not listening to this live as well. That's going to be up for a while. So make sure when you get that email to contribute to it if there's anything you'd love to add to that. So I know we went over time, but are there any outstanding questions that I may have missed? Was there something you were hoping to gain that you did not get that you think I may be able to answer for you? What are those questions? Anything? Do you feel that your student workers were honest about their engagement check-ins? I do. I think by the time I started doing it, we were well into the year. And so some of my students had rated like 5s or 6s, and a lot of them were seniors. And so for me, that was a good indication that's like, okay, there's some senioritis going on here. They're kind of lacking engagement in general. How can I make this experience better for them? How can I encourage them to just finish this year strong? And so I would say I do think that they were very honest, because at that point in our relationship, at that point in the year, there was no reason for them to kind of lie or not do that, because those were things that I kept. I did not like put this in their file. Their next supervisors were not getting it. It was a very confidential kind of opportunity for them to share what they were honestly feeling. And for me, that was what I wanted. I didn't do the engagement check-ins to feel better about myself. I wanted to know, is what I'm doing working? Are they engaged? Are there other opportunities for us to create things that they're going to enjoy more, or ways that they're going to continue to be more motivated as students under my supervision? So I think that they were honest. I think if you're doing this from the very beginning, I just love to know how that works out, and see how, you know, that process works for you. If you think that they're being honest, or maybe you want to try doing the anonymous route first, that may be helpful until you have developed that rapport and that better relationship. Good question though. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Anything I missed? Feel free to jump on the mic or on the camera. I have the chat open now, so. Yes, no problem. Thank you for joining. Any other questions? Anything I might have missed? Thank you, Ray. I appreciate that message. Awesome. Okay, so if you do have any other questions, feel free to email me. You should all have that contact information. This is a list of my contact information as well if you want to connect with me. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post very frequently. If you're somebody who does this as well, feel free to tag me. Feel free to contribute to conversations. I'll try to do the same. I am very active on Instagram as well, so I try to post at least 3 different times a week. I provide career and personal branding tips. So this might be helpful for you personally. It might be helpful for your students to follow. So I do a lot of things in relation to college students as well. Or if you want to email me, that's my direct email address, and then my website as well. But yeah, let's stay in touch. If you do want to contribute contribute to that article, please do. I'd love to feature you all. I'd love to expose some people to the work that we're doing. I'm connected with a lot of people who are outside of higher ed, and a lot of them don't realize how much work and how great work that we do. So this can be helpful to kind of expose them to some of that. But thank you all once again. I'll be sure to send out that follow-up either later today or tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. And if I miss anything, feel free to shoot me an email and contact me. But thank you, Frank, for helping moderate the chat. Thank you, Dominique, for joining and sharing your experience. Thank you, Terrence, for sharing your experience. And thank all of you for attending. I really appreciate it.